Coming up on Judge Rinder's Crime Stories, could new forensic technology help track down the killer of an elderly lady?
So we put ourselves forward to be one of the first police forces to utilise this service.
It's a very new technique, but they were willing to do it because they wanted to solve it.
And later, a man's life is in danger.
She said to me, "Tonight you're not going to go to sleep. You are not going to wake up in the morning. I'm going to kill you."
All we hear on at night time is screaming, shouting, him saying, "Don't hurt me, just leave me, stop it, please."
When police started to investigate the sexual assault and murder of an elderly lady in Mansfield, Nottinghamshire, little did they know that the hunt for her killer would lead to the use of a groundbreaking DNA profiling technique, the effects of which continued to be used throughout the world today. On the 8th of September 2002, police were called to the home of 87-year-old Gladys Godfrey.
The flowers have started to pile up in the pouring rain outside the home of Gladys Godfrey in the Ladybrook area of Mansfield in Nottinghamshire. Tonight, following Gladys's murder, neighbours have just one question: why?
I was a superintendent on the homicide team. We were notified that there'd been an elderly lady found deceased in a home address. There were no signs of forced entry, but we subsequently established that Gladys had a habit of leaving the front door insecure. There was blood in the front room, and it appeared that an attack had happened in that room, and then Gladys had been taken, possibly dragged into the bedroom, and that was where she was found.
Gladys had been subjected to an extremely violent attack.
She'd been punched, possibly kicked and stamped upon. She had severe facial fractures, bones in her neck were broken, and she'd been subjected to a severe sexual assault. It's one of the worst cases that we've had to investigate. Gladys was 6 stone in weight. She'd had a previous hip and knee replacement. She couldn't walk without the aid of a walking frame. She was extremely frail, and the need to use such violence on an 87-year-old defenceless lady was just unimaginable.
Many elderly people live in the area. The police are stepping up their visible presence here and urging people to be vigilant.
With Kevin Flint at the helm, the search for Gladys's killer was underway, and the investigation was to be carried out by homicide detective DC Phil Cumberpatch on his first murder case.
I'd been involved in the investigation of serious crime for a little while, but as for a full-blown murder investigation, this was the first time I'd been along. So it was not just being a detective; it was learning how to be a homicide detective.
One of the first things to do is carry out door-to-door inquiries and have a look at the intelligence in and around the area.
Knocking on doors, seeing if anybody saw, heard, witnessed anything or could tell us anything about Gladys. It became apparent that Gladys had a habit of sleeping in a chair in a lounge as opposed to retiring to bed in the evening. She had a fear of going to sleep in the bed and not getting up. And describe people as that's where people die, in the bed.
Was this why Gladys was in the lounge at the time her killer struck? Despite living alone in a warded bungalow on the Ladybrook estate, Gladys was a very popular character within the local community.
Gladys was popular and well-liked in Ladybrook. She took time to speak to everyone she met. Neighbours say they're appalled by what's happened.
She would often stand at her door with a walking frame. She'd speak to locals. She was very well known.
She was a single lady, didn't have any children of her own, but obviously had family members that cared deeply about her.
She was well cared for by her niece, who was very, very close to her and visited Gladys on a regular basis.
There was genuine upset that somebody had done that to such a lovely member of the community.
To the surprise of the investigation team, this wasn't the first time that Gladys had been the victim of an attack.
We quickly established that the previous year, in 2001, in the April, Gladys had been subject of an attack in her own home.
Who is it?
The offender knocked on the door at 3 o'clock in the morning, forced his way in.
Who are you? Get out of my house!
Attacked Gladys in the lounge and tried to sexually assault Gladys.
Help! Help! Get out!
But Gladys fought back. She picked up a lemonade bottle, she struck out at the offender and he ran away, but took Gladys's handbag as he left the premises. We also know that in Gladys fighting back, she managed to pull the offender's earring out of his ear, and also she scratched him.
Gladys's bravery ensured that police at the time were able to retrieve a partial DNA profile of the perpetrator.
That was searched on the National DNA database, but sadly to no avail, which obviously meant that the offender had not had his DNA taken previously. Looking at our offence, we were able to establish a full DNA profile of the offender, searched that on the National DNA database, and again, it didn't hit anyone on the database.
However, significantly, this full profile did match the partial profile from the earlier attack, meaning the same person had returned to kill Gladys.
They were obviously more determined this time because of the severity of the attack, but because the two attacks were linked via DNA, we knew it was the same person responsible, and it led us to believe it was more likely to be a localised offender and not someone who was travelling around the county or the country.
And this wasn't the only clue left by the attacker.
And we knew that on the first offence, Gladys's handbag had been stolen.
Police investigated the first attack in April last year, but no arrest was made. The murder team have widened house-to-house inquiries to a nearby street where the stolen handbag was found.
The handbag was found about 4 days after north of where Gladys lived, but only a few streets away. So that indicated that the offender possibly could live north of the attack, because offenders tend to return home once they've carried out the offence.
The police were also able to gain further insights as to the possible identity of the killer from a statement Gladys had given after the first attack.
That was an unusual thing in that we had an account from the victim of her attacker, because Gladys made a statement in 2001 and she described him as a man in his early 20s, a white male with dark hair, and he had dark clothing on.
It was just the description given by, bless her, a frail old lady under attack. How reliable that could be, we don't know, but it's all we had at the time.
Armed with the intelligence obtained from these attacks, the police decided the best way forward was to carry out a swabbing operation.
With having fairly quickly established the DNA profile of the offender, we had a tool within our armoury to eliminate people. So obtaining voluntary DNA swabs was the primary investigative aim that we adopted. Swabbing males from the age of 15 through to the late 60s and 70 years of age, predominantly north of where Gladys lived, because that's where the handbag had been found.
We all became part of the swab team. It was a huge exercise. It was laborious. It's not fast cars. It's not chasing folk around. It's repetitive, but you know that you've got to get it right.
The support from the public was fantastic, as you would expect. Just the very details of the attack on a frail old lady in her own home was really enough publicity that you had to give to this to get the support.
The swabbing was a long and arduous process. A year into the investigation, and Gladys's killer had still not been identified.
You can't let people get away with murder. You just can't. And when you think you're running out of steam, you think what happened to Gladys. So you don't give up, do you? And credit to the boss, he won't let you give up.
We were determined that we would actually catch this man, but also fearful that this person who'd attacked twice might attack again.
Coming up, could a new breakthrough in DNA profiling techniques be the key to catching Gladys's killer?
It was a new technique, so I had to talk to the scientists many, many times to understand what it meant.
I think they'd run out of lines of inquiry and really, really wanted to solve the case, and I guess sort of took a chance.
In September 2002, Gladys Godfrey was sexually assaulted and murdered in her own home. Through DNA profiles that had been left at the crime scene, police discovered that the same man had attacked Gladys 18 months earlier when she'd bravely fought him off. Unable to find a match on the DNA database, a year on, and the killer was still at large. But could a new scientific breakthrough be about to help crack the case? Senior investigating officer Kevin Flint had been made aware of an important new advancement in DNA profiling technology that he thought might be able to help their investigation.
Familial DNA profiling was about to be released to the police services throughout the country for the first time in September 2003. So we put ourselves forward to be one of the first police forces to utilise this service.
Richard Pinchin, head of the Forensic Intelligence Bureau, and his team were responsible for helping to develop the technology behind this new service.
So the question was, could we use the DNA from the scene of the crime to help forward investigations for the police? And because DNA is inherited, we decided to look at whether or not we could try and find family members on the database.
A colleague of Richard's at the Forensic Science Service had already experimented using this technique on a case he was working on. It had been a long, drawn-out process, as senior intelligence analyst Francis Bates recalls.
This scientist had done some work pretty much by hand in terms of recreating an offender's DNA profile via relatives, and realised the potential value of looking for relatives on the database.
And he approached us because we were working in the research department and said if we could automate it to make the whole process a lot more slick and bring it to a full-blown service for the police, he believed that we could derive some benefit from that technology.
At the time, each person's DNA was recorded as a series of 20 numbers, and using their newly developed automated software, the team would be able to search the database for DNA profiles, offering a close match of 16 numbers or more to that of the crime scene profiles, indicating they could be close relatives.
The familial search is really trying to look at what we would term first-degree relatives. The further you get away from that family, you're increasing the pool of genetic information from which your DNA profile can be drawn from.
Nottinghamshire Police engaged the services of the FIB, hoping that familial searching could provide the breakthrough they needed on Gladys's case.
I was the lead intelligence analyst on this case, which meant I was the main point of contact for the investigative team. So part of my role was, I guess, education, to make sure they knew what they were going to get from this service. We're giving you a list of names. The list that we're giving you are potential relatives. They're not the offenders in this case.
It was a new technique, so I had to talk to the scientists many, many times to understand what it meant. It's not an easy subject matter to get your head around.
The database search itself could come back with results in a matter of minutes, but there would still be plenty of work to do.
Remember, we're looking at close matches, and there are going to be lots. At the time, there was 5 million people on the database.
A familial search, just based on genetic information alone, could be thousands of names long. Also, part of my role was to discuss with the senior investigating officer information surrounding the offender that we could use to narrow down the familial search. So, for example, their age. We had a good description, in this case, from Gladys from the first attack, so we knew a rough age of the offender. From that, we could speculate perhaps how old a parent or a child could be of that offender, how old a brother or sister could be. So that was a parameter that we could then use to narrow down the results. We could use geography as another means of reducing the list.
Those lists come back, and then it's a matter for investigators to research those and try and identify the offender from those. So it's not as simple as you might think. It can be a laborious process.
So Detective Phil Cumberbatch and his colleagues were back out in the community again taking swabs. This time, thanks to the familial search lists, their efforts were much more focused.
It became far more person-targeted as opposed to area-targeted. However, you've got the matrix to combine the two. If they are a familial link and they live in Manchester, they're right down the list. If they're a familial link and live in the direction behind Gladys's, then they perhaps ought to be towards the top of the list. So that list was formed, and we chipped away at that.
We tried to eliminate family groups from the Mansfield area, first of all. And we visited these families and obtained DNA from the adult males.
So it was that day after day after day, hour after hour, knocking on doors, swabbing, but that became the main focus of the inquiry.
Every time you went to work, you wondered whether that would be the day that you would catch Gladys as killer.
And eventually, that day did arrive.
You knew the minute you walked in that morning that there was a buzz, there was something different.
We'd identified the offender and arrested him within 3 months of the familial technique.
There was no matching sample on the national DNA database, and testing of local men didn't catch the killer. But new technology enabled detectives to use DNA from the crime scene to widen their search and find the killer's relatives.
Jason Ward fitted the police profile of a young local offender.
Jason was a Mansfield lad who was young when he committed these crimes, 21 when he actually murdered Gladys, and 20 the year before when he'd attacked Gladys in her own home. He worked locally, lived at home with his family. Very little contact with the police in his history for some minor offences, but those offences had not warranted his DNA being taken.
After 15 months of searching and swabbing in excess of 1,100 people during that time, the police now had their man.
It was calm when he was arrested, obviously brought back to the police station, interviewed by the team, initially denied the offence and then subsequently made admissions to the offence when presented with the evidence. He said that Gladys screamed as he entered the house, but we believe that he didn't give Gladys any chance whatsoever. He knew that Gladys had fought him off the year before, so he attacked Gladys violently straight away.
Undoubtedly, Ward went back to rape and murder Gladys. There was a rage to this attack. Maybe it was the hostility that he also leveraged against her from the first incident of his failure. Maybe he felt that he needed to snuff out her life because she dared to fight. But he went to town on destroying her body and her life.
We did establish that he had a drug habit of inhaling aerosol cans, which may or may not have affected his demeanour and his attitude and his aggravated state on the night that he attacked Gladys. He was charged with the attempted rape in 2001, the rape of Gladys in 2002, and her murder in 2002.
Ward pleaded guilty to the charges of indecent assault, rape, murder and burglary. meaning he would face a sentencing hearing rather than a full trial. It took place in May 2004.
Because we'd created a really good working relationship with Nottinghamshire Police, they invited me down to see Jason Ward sentenced. That was, really humbling for me. I suppose you always think that they're going to look like a monster, but he was very young, only just an adult, and it was strange to see this young person who'd done such a horrific thing to a completely innocent person.
We would really like to think that we could look at an individual and believe, yes, that's the kind of human being that would rape and murder an old lady. But the really scary thing is you can't do that. Just because somebody's a loner who lives at home with their parents does not mean they are not a psychopathic rapist and murderer. Individuals like Ward are terrifying. They're terrifying because they live in the shadows of our society without detection on the whole. But that doesn't mean that they're not dangerous.
Once a judge had heard the details of Gladys's case, he sentenced Jason Ward to life in prison with a minimum of 22 years.
I was actually sat behind Gladys's relatives. I saw their reaction to when Jason Ward got sentenced to life. So for me, seeing that very human reaction to something that I'd had a very small part in was very emotional for me and something that I'm very, very proud of to this day.
The police were emotional, we were emotional, and we were proud to have played our part, and we were proud that familial DNA was able to bring the case to a conclusion.
The police and the FIB had created a piece of investigative history.
It's the first case in the world where familial DNA was used in a murder conviction.
I think it really opened the doors and demonstrated the worth of familial searching. I still see the impact that familial searching has to this day. It's spread around the world, it's used in different countries, particularly in America. And when I see other cases that have been solved by this technique, again, you kind of think, well, that's something that we started.
Without the familial technique, many major crimes, many homicides would still remain undetected throughout the country and throughout the world. It's a fantastic development in DNA science.
Coming up, a new relationship turns violent.
She unscrewed this Hoover. Whack! She cracked my head like it was a rounder's ball.
Ian McNicholl had everything he could want from life. A successful career, a healthy bank balance, and a good group of friends. The only thing missing was a romantic partner. But after a chance meeting at a railway station in Birmingham, Ian thought he'd found the woman of his dreams. But was she too good to be true?
It was 2006, and 44-year-old financial consultant Ian McNicholl was living in a home he loved in a friendly neighbourhood in Grimsby.
If anybody needed anything, that community was so close-knit. They knew that they could confide in you. They could tell you things in confidence.
Dominic Reynolds was one of Ian's neighbours.
He was a bit like a big brother. He's kind, caring. He'd do anything for anybody.
And Dominic often returned the favour.
He worked away a lot, so we'd look after his house if he was away.
I was running my own business, travelling around the country doing a job that I absolutely loved. I class myself as being really fortunate.
Sadly, the one thing missing from Ian's life was a serious relationship.
I was always looking for somebody who would be a best friend. There'd be trust and respect and honesty and all the values that I thought was really important.
But a chance encounter whilst working away was about to change Ian's life forever.
I'd landed in Birmingham New Street Station. My train was delayed, so I went to get a large pasty. And munching on this Cornish pasty, just not looking where I was going, and almost knocked this little slip of a lady off her feet.
It's all right.
I didn't see you.
And I couldn't apologise enough. And then, lo and behold, we found ourselves still at the platform, waiting for the same train. We sat in different seats, and as I got off the train, she saw me, and I was lost because I'd never been into Wolverhampton before. She asked me where I was going. She said, well, ironically, where are you going to be working? My house is 10 minutes beyond there. Do you want to share a cab?
The lady's name was Michelle, and the taxi ride, albeit brief, gave the pair a chance to talk.
She was such a tiny thing. She was 5'1", 7 stone, jet black hair, really attractive, really full of energy and a quirky sense of humour. And she said, you know, if you're at a loose end, you're on your own, if you want to go and watch a movie or just have a bite to eat, here's my number.
Ian decided to take Michelle up on her offer.
We did connect. We made each other laugh, which for me was important in a relationship. And after we'd been together for about 4 months, she explained to me there'd been an argument at home, and would it be possible if she could stay at mine just until the dust had settled.
Ian was happy to oblige, and Michelle moved in.
From just first meeting her, it was like, oh yeah, she seems nice. I believe my mum thought the same, and my sister, yeah, she's nice. We thought Ian was going to be happy.
Life was good for the couple, but it didn't last.
She was hoovering one day in my front room, which I didn't expect her to do. I was quite capable of doing it myself. And she just said to me very openly, what was the last sexual act you performed on your last girlfriend? And I thought she was joking, really quirky sense of humour. And I laughed, and in a flash, she unscrewed this hoover. Whack! She cracked my head like it was a rounder's ball. She suddenly started shouting, she was swearing. Of course, I actually couldn't remember. I made something up. I thought, I'll just give her any answer. It'll calm her down. And eventually, it did calm her down. And I remember she walked into the kitchen, just wiped the blood off the hoover, put it back together, and carried on as if nothing had happened.
Sadly, this attack was just the first of many.
Her favourite, she got annoyed. She would have a mobile phone secreted behind her hand, and she'd come up to me, and I could tell she was getting angry. And in a flash, she'd come close. Boom. Here, these had been fractured that many times. She used the mobile phone like a hammer knocking a nail in. She lit cigarettes and put them up my nose, where they stayed all night, and I've never smoked in my life. That's why she did it. She boiled a kettle of water and poured it all over me. And she says, if you thought it hurt the first time with an expletive, wait until it comes a second time. She cannot do that. Not even she would do that. You hear the flick of the switch, and she poured it the second time all over me. And then just went into the kitchen and made a coffee.
Ian was trapped.
And she said to me, if you make any attempt to leave, my brothers are in organised crime, they'll kill you. I've got no access to money. She's got my bank card. If I leave, I know I'm going to be killed.
Michelle is clever with her domestic violence because she creates a backstory. So he puts up with the abuse because he genuinely believes the narrative she's created. And that's a powerful and scary narrative.
Michelle managed to gain complete control of Ian's life.
Just imagine waking up when you're told to wake up, or not going to sleep at all because you're not allowed, asking permission to go to the toilet, eating what you're given, the verbal abuse. You know, you're ugly. You do realise if you leave, nobody else will want you. That first period of just 4 months, I think she groomed me. So she started playing with some of my sleep patterns. That's why I decided to take a break from work, because I was exhausted. She started to manipulate relationships by telling friends that I wanted money back, that I'd never even lent to them. So they stopped calling.
The unusual events at Ian's address hadn't gone completely unnoticed by the outside world.
After an assault, she'd send me to the local shops to buy some cigarettes. And the minute my foot stepped outside the property, the mobile phone's in my hand and she's on the house phone speaking to me. So I can't talk to anybody. I can't give any signals about what's going on.
Ian had sort of walked past and I shouted at him. I was like, Ian. And he didn't turn round, which is unusual.
Ian! Ian!
So I ran up to him, I tapped him, and I was like, Ian, are you all right? He was like, don't talk to me at all, don't acknowledge me. He said, just walk away. He was like, just for your safety, please, just walk away. I thought, well, have I frightened him by running up, shouting his name, tapping him on the shoulder?
My first thought was by not speaking to anybody else, I was keeping them safe. And for me, I'm thinking she's looking out the window, and when I go back, it doesn't matter what I tell her I said, she won't believe it, and there'll be more violence.
Some of Ian's direct neighbours were becoming increasingly worried about his situation.
His next-door neighbours, they said all we hear on at night time is screaming, shouting, him saying, don't hurt me, just leave me, stop it, please. So something's going on here. But then we couldn't do anything because you've got to prove it.
Ian felt that there was only one way out.
Eventually, after 14 months, I believed that she would kill me if I stayed. I'd be killed if I left. So the best thing I could do, I planned my own suicide.
However, it looked like Michelle was about to beat Ian to it.
Within 3 days of me planning my own suicide, she said to me, tonight you're not going to go to sleep. You are not going to wake up in the morning. I'm going to kill you.
Coming up, Michelle's most vicious attack yet.
On and off, it must have lasted 6 hours. The assault only stopped because she was tired, she fell asleep, she exhausted herself.
But could help finally be at hand.
She's behind me, my eyes were wide. And I said to her, it's the police.
Maybe it's the police.
When Ian McNicholl met Michelle Williamson, he thought he'd found the perfect partner. But 4 months into their relationship, she launched a vicious attack on him, behavior that would become the brutal norm in the weeks and months that followed. Trapped and fearing he could be killed, could Ian find an escape from the clutches of Michelle before it was too late?
Just over a year into her reign of terror, Michelle was about to stage her worst attack to date.
She got a metal bar off a rowing machine. She went all the way down my legs. She went all the way down my arm. She cracked me around the head with this hammer, and everything went like a thick fog. I can't see, I can't see. Don't you exaggerate to me, she said, and she just shoved me.
Exaggerate?
I had no idea where I was going, and I fell back. I cracked the back of my head on what I now know to be the windowsill. And then this mist seemed to clear again. And as it came round, she rammed this hammer into my side. She fractured 3 of my ribs. And then the third strike, she hit me that hard here, the hammer broke. And she came over to me really calmly and just said to me, take your T-shirt off or I'll steam your face. Well, I knew that if I didn't take my T-shirt off, she'd steam my face. She put it here, she put it here, and she put it between my shoulder blades. The assault only stopped because she was tired, she fell asleep, she exhausted herself. I was in that much pain, I couldn't breathe, I didn't know I'd broke my ribs. I thought, I'm just going to try and get up the stairs and go to bed and see what happens. She came up to bed and got in, didn't say anything. And then I remember being woken up with this knock on the door. And she woke up in a flash and just said, oh, it'll be something I've ordered from a catalogue. So I said, I'll just have a look, see who it is. She's behind me, my eyes were wide. And I said to her, it's the police. Stay there, she said. She went downstairs and she had always drilled into me, if the police ever turn up, you have got those injuries from a gambling debt that you promised to pay and you didn't.
Right, you stay here.
So she told me to stay there, and I heard her as she went down and let the police in. Her opening remark was, "What has he done now?"
Yeah.
Police came in, they shouted up to me, and she kept going on, "What has he done? What has he done this time?" And the officer said, "You stay in that room, Ian, stay on the stairs, we're going to talk to you." The officer just said to me, "Come on," he said, "we're going to go and sit in the van where we can speak without interruptions." I remember him saying to me, "Look, the windows are black. Nobody knows you're here. There's just me and you. Now, I can see you're in a bad way. What on earth's happened? God, what if they don't believe me? They'll leave, she'll kill me." So I said, 2 guys have turned up and beat me up last night. I better say last night. And I don't know what made me do it. But as he was asking me about these injuries, I pulled my sleeve up and I saw his mouth fall open. And he said to me, "I believe the person that caused the injuries are in that house." And I remember I just nodded. And he said to me, "Ian, you have to tell me yes." Getting that word, yes, from here to here, took every last ounce of energy I'd left. And I just said to him, "Yes." And I collapsed. And he just said, "It's an affirmative. Keep her there."
DC Grant Peary was on duty at Grimsby Police Station the day that Ian was rescued.
A neighbour had gone to the police station at Grimsby to report concerns for Ian. He reported that Michelle was beating him. And so the officers went to this address.
Ian was now in the safety of the police station, where his injuries were documented.
They introduced me to this police doctor, and then this guy who had like a sketchbook with an outline of a body. And he must have gone through God knows how many books, filling in all these marks on me.
They included the open sore on his left hand, which we thought was a burn because it looked like it was bright red. And as it turns out, Ian said it had happened months ago. And because she kept assaulting him on that point, it failed to heal.
The guy gets up to go, and I always remember the officer said to him, "I'm sorry, we haven't finished yet. You've only done the top half."
I think if it had been the other way round, it would have definitely been reported to the police, and Michelle would have been given support for Ian's treatment of her.
Now, in 2007, when this happened, domestic violence towards men did occur, but it wasn't very much in the press.
This case showed that it's not always women. Men can be subject to violence from women as well, and are subject to many of the responses that women portray.
By now, Michelle had been arrested and was in police custody.
When I interviewed her, she was very, very talkative. If you like, she had the gift of the gab in that she was always able to try and talk herself out of a situation. It was very much not her fault. She was happy to admit that she had punched him on an occasion, and she admitted to pouring a cup of herbal tea on his lap. Everything else she denied.
What we see with a lot of perpetrators is they tell you a little bit of the truth to make them appear genuine. So yes, I have an anger problem. Yes, I have occasionally attacked them, but it's always done in this way that says, but it's 'cause I was pushed.
Accompanied by forensics, DC Peary went to Ian's house to corroborate his story.
It was in a squalid state. There was blood on some items. Upstairs in the bedroom, there was blood on the walls as well, I recall. There were a number of items I recovered from there that Ian had mentioned, including a broken claw hammer on the stairs and a metal bar from a rowing machine that had blood on it. It appeared that whenever anything happened, it was never cleaned up.
Police were gaining valuable evidence against Michelle, and after a trip to hospital where yet more of Ian's injuries were uncovered, he was taken to the Salvation Army hostel in Hull, run by service manager Patrick Tamminen.
He was very introverted in himself, very frightened of everything, and the first conversation was, "You're safe now. We're going to put you onto the assessment unit. You've got your own room, you've got your own key to lock your door, and nobody will come in that room if you don't want them to."
And they said, you can stay. And you will stay here on this assessment suite for a minimum of 10 days. And I swear to God, it felt like I was on a holiday, luxurious, in a 5-star hotel.
It transpired that Ian's injuries also included a fractured skull.
His physical issues, they were life-threatening, and the Salvation Army's mission statement is to save souls, save suffering humanity and grow saints. And in that situation, we were really saving souls with Ian because he was a very poorly man.
While Ian was being cared for at the hostel, Michelle had been bailed back to his house.
I had to take Michelle to court to get her out of my own house. The thought of coming face to face with her just 3 weeks later in a civil court with no police there was absolutely petrifying. And I went into court, I got the occupation order, but I couldn't pay for the house. So I lost the house. Nearly 100 grand of equity. I lost my business because Michelle had pillaged the money out of the account. But the Salvation Army kept me safe for as long as I needed to be safe.
Ian remained at the hostel for 18 months, where his confidence and financial independence began to grow. And it was nearly a year into this stay that Michelle stood trial accused of 3 charges of ABH and 2 of GBH.
And I'd prepared as best I could. I'd been to a courtroom, I'd watched a couple of trials to see how things worked.
I remember seeing Michelle in the dock. She appeared to be smiling throughout. I think she was in denial that anyone would believe anything that was said about her.
Michelle had not anticipated such a show of strength from Ian.
I gave evidence for 2.5 days. I remember a barrister making a big thing of, "You're trying to make this jury believe that you, a guy who was 13.5 stone and 6 foot, was overpowered by a 5 foot 1, 7 stone. It's a pack of lies." And of course, what certainly wasn't understood then was the psychological abuse.
One of the first questions I asked Ian was why he never hit her back. He told me he'd been brought up not to hit women. I couldn't really argue with that. She'd effectively waged psychological warfare on him.
Everybody has a stereotype of what an abuser looks like, and it's not a 5'1" petite woman. That, to some degree, is the problem with society. We think that domestic abuse is about physical power. It's actually about control. And a small woman who has weapons around her can be equally as dangerous as a 6'5" man.
Official sources were also able to corroborate Ian's evidence, because although he had not received medical treatment for most of his injuries, Michelle did so for her own.
There are a number of points I discovered in the investigation where he'd gone to hospital with her. And one of the earliest assaults was her thinking she had broken her hand, punching him. And he had black eyes when he went to hospital with her.
But would the jury believe that Michelle was capable of the crimes she stood accused of?
The worst time is to send the jury out and you've got to wait. And you almost hear the clock ticking like a bomb. Boom, 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 boom. And then you call back and you get the verdict of guilty. I feel like I've just won Olympic gold. I've done the best I can. She's been found guilty by 12 people who I don't know, and she's going to go to prison for a very long time.
When the verdicts were read out, I think she was shocked, despite all the evidence that had been presented.
The judge sentenced her to 7 years in prison.
And I felt as though I'd been cheated in a way. But then, as the dust settled on it, I knew I'd had my chance to say my piece about what she'd done and how it had affected me, and that was taken into account. 7 years is a long time.
It was important for Ian to use his experiences to help others by getting his story into the public domain and working with the charity Mankind.
But there's many more men just like me. And so the work we do with the charity, and the reason why I share what I've been through, if people look at that and it gets them to look at men in a different light, it could also be life-saving.
There are still thousands of men out there putting up on a daily basis with this kind of abuse. And the only way we change it is to understand that gender has nothing to do with the violence of domestic abuse. It's about relationships and power.
Ian has also campaigned to raise awareness that victims of abuse have the right to anonymity on the electoral roll. And his message is clear. Anyone suffering abuse needs to know that help is out there.
I understand you will be scared. You will feel alone. But confide in someone. The police have specially skilled domestic abuse officers. And what I can promise you, my life today is totally unrecognisable from the life I had with Michelle. So I'm happy today.